right, so my name is Greg Stoneburner. I'm a local horseshoer, one of many in the valley. I service Crested Butte, Lake City, Gunnison, obviously. I don't have a fancy PowerPoint for you today. I'm not that technologically advanced. Sometimes technology and I don't get along, so hopefully you can bear with me. Today I wanted to talk about really 3 or 4 main things that are going to affect the health of your horse's feet here. So the first being turnout, the second being proper hoof care and maintenance, and the third being the feed. Those 3 things are really what's going to affect your horses, not only their feet, but their overall health. So let's start talking about feed. Pretty much anybody that's got horses knows about things like founder, and we know that we have to shoe them, obviously, if we're going to go work them in the mountains or anything like that. But your turnout conditions play a big part in that. So a problem that I see a lot of in horse feet here, especially during like monsoon season and the irrigation season, is everybody just takes their horses and they chuck them out in the pasture in the wet ground, and they leave them in the wet ground. Well, this creates a couple of problems. Horse feet don't do well in wet climates. Everywhere we've seen horses flourish and thrive has been dry, arid areas. So like the Book Cliffs, like Sandwash Basin, where you see all the wild Mustangs out in Arizona. What happens when a horse foot gets wet is it soaks up moisture. They're porous. They're made of basically super compressed keratin. It's just like a fingernail. And it soaks up the water. And what happens when they soak up the water is that foot will swell and it'll start to crack, and there's an opportunity for bacteria and moisture, etc., to get up inside that foot, and that's where you see your abscesses and infections and thrush and things like that in your horse foot. So really with turnout, the drier the ground you can keep them on, the better. I know it's not always possible, but even if you're, say, put them out in the field during the day and bring them back in at night, that's going to do wonders for helping your horse's feet out. It'll make it much easier to shoe. The shoes will stay on longer, and you're going to have an overall just healthier foot. As far as hoof dressings you can put on, there's really only one that I recommend, and it's American Venice Turpentine. You'll have to get it online. I don't think Colorado can ship it in anymore, but that's the only one I've found that of the products that seems to work to help keep horse feet healthy and some of the moisture out of them. The other thing that can help out a horse foot still is kind of under debate is hot fit. I know a lot of guys don't do a hot fit anymore, where you're searing the bottom of the foot with a hot shoe, and to me it helps them out quite a bit. I work on a lot of horses that get turned out and left in super high moisture environments, and when you hot fit that shoe, it sears the bottom of those tubules shut so that there's less moisture absorption into the foot, and I've had very good luck keeping feet healthier that are in a wet environment by just simply hot fitting a shoe. So there's that option, and I know it's few and far between, but I know a couple of the guys here locally still do it, me included. Let's talk a little bit about feed. So the feed that you put your horse on is one of the other most important things to consider, and that's where we start to hear about things like founder, laminitis. Without going into too much detail, laminitis is the pre-stage to founder almost. And without going into a whole bunch of anatomy, basically there's proteins that hold certain sections of the foot together inside your horse's foot, and what happens when a laminitic episode occurs is that protein balance gets disrupted, and the lamina swell, and it causes pain and discomfort for the horse, and in an extreme situation you get a founder, which is where all of that will mechanically separate. And then you've got a big problem that's going to require the vet to come out, x-rays, corrective shoeing, therapeutic shoeing, things like that. So with your feed choice, really anything that's high in carbohydrates and proteins and sugars is not great for your horse. I'm not a vet, and I'm not an expert in this by any means completely, but I've had very good luck with just straight dry grass hay. You know, there's enough proteins and sugars in it to keep your horse healthy, but there's not an overabundance. Where we see an overabundance is things like alfalfa and like sweet feed, things with a lot of sugar, starches, carbohydrates, and proteins. So a lot of times we watch for founder in the spring. You know, everybody's super concerned about turning your horse right out on straight green grass, because what happens is as the days get warm but the nights are still cool, you know, you've got a nice warm day and the grass is starting to grow, and then as the plant, for lack of a better term, feels the day cooling down, the plant goes, oh no, we need to store energy for tonight. So what this plant does is it sucks a bunch of energy in, and it superloads all those carbohydrates and the sugars in order to survive the night until it makes it to the morning when it gets warm again. What happens is your horse goes out, eats that super carbohydrate packed grass, and it disrupts those proteins, and that's where you start getting laminitis and founder. Everybody thinks about it in the spring. A lot of folks, at least that I've seen around here, don't think about it as much in the fall, and it is just as much of a problem in the fall as it is in the spring. So it's definitely something to watch out for, and kind of regulate your horse's turnout during those warm day, cold night scenarios. The other thing is even dried alfalfa from a bale, you're still a super high sugar content. I mean, alfalfa is high energy. That's why we like to feed it per pound. It's got more energy in it than regular grass hay, but you really have to watch that. And the other thing you get into is bunches and bunches of supplements. You really have to watch when you start feeding your horse supplements, things like sweet feed, grains, and all of that, because you can get an overload. And kind of for lack of a better description, it's kind of like horsey diabetes, where the body can't handle an excess of insulin, or it can't handle an excess of the proteins or the sugars in the blood, and the first part that it affects is the feet. And there are a couple of metabolic diseases that horses can get later on in their life. Cushing's is one that I'm fairly certain most people have heard of. Equine metabolic is just something that's coming onto the forefront. We're kind of paying attention to now, and it's a little bit different than Cushing's, but there's a lot of the same symptoms, and they can find it through almost the same type of blood work, depending on which vet you want to chat with. But horses tend to get these kind of things a little later in their life, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 years old. So when we start seeing those, and you'll look for a big fat crested neck and pads of fat on the butt, things like that. So if your horse starts getting a big crested neck and seems to be putting on weight and getting kind of pudgy, you might have a look-see and make sure that it could just be an easy keeper, but there might be something bigger going on. And that's a discussion to have with your farrier and your vet if you see that happening. So that's, without going into too much more detail, what you need to watch out for in feed. The last thing I want to talk about is proper hoof care. As a farrier, my job is pretty small and insignificant compared to what you should be doing with your horse in between farrier visits. You know, I see your horse once every 6 weeks if it's barefoot, or once every 8 weeks if it's shod. And in between then, there are some big things that need to be taken care of, and that's really, if I'm speaking honestly, something that a lot of folks struggle with is caring for their horse's feet in between farrier visits. You know, a lot of people call us and we show up and we trim them or we shoe them and then chuck them out and go ride them, and don't look at the feet or don't touch the feet until we show up again in 6-8 weeks. And I think if there was an area for improvement, that would be it. There's more to like picking up your horse's feet and picking them out than just picking your horse's feet out. I know a lot of us are taught as youngsters, every time you get on your horse, you pick up a foot and you pick it out. Well, the why behind that is, for one, you can see that foot and you can see if something's going on. You know, you're looking for bruises, you're looking for a loose shoe, you're looking for something that's not quite right. And for two, picking the horse's feet out gets all of the nasty debris and the bacteria and everything that they've been standing in out of the foot. Because what happens is they go stand in, like most horse corrals, they're full of horse manure, right? Cow manure or whatever else they're walking in. Well, that's a great breeding ground for bacteria. So when you pick up a foot and you pick it out, you're giving yourself a chance to clean out all the bacteria that's in that horse foot and all the compacted material in there, and giving that foot a chance to breathe and to be healthy without jamming a bunch of bacteria into the foot and creating a thrush problem or an abscess problem or something like that. Another part of foot care let's talk about is preparing your horse for the farrier. That's another big issue we seem to see a lot of. And yeah, it's my job to come work on your horse's feet and to know how to handle an unruly horse and to be patient with a horse that's maybe not been shod a lot of times. But there's a certain amount of prep work that we really appreciate you as horse owners doing before we show up. And part of that goes back to picking up your horse's feet and picking them out. Even the 30 seconds it takes you to pick out your horse's feet every day is going to help them stand better for us when we show up. And the way that your horse stands for us when we show up to work on it directly affects their hoof quality, because it regulates how good of a job we can do on those feet. So if I show up to shoe your horse and it fights me the whole time and I can barely keep a foot off the ground long enough to nail a shoe on it, is the quality of that shoe job going to be as good as one that stands there patiently for me? Probably not. So preparing your horse for us to show up and work on it is a huge part of this. And that can be something as simple as pick up the feet and pick them out, and when you pick them out, take a rock or the back of your hoof pick or whatever and tap on the feet. Get them used to it. anything you can do that makes them more comfortable with having their feet handled does better for us when we show up, and we're going to be happier. You're probably not going to get fired, because I fire clients for bad horses, and I think a lot of the other guys here do too. And yeah, so that, I guess in a nutshell, that's basically the simple, here's what you can do to help us out of the farrier industry. So I'm going to open this up to questions at this point. I think I only have 2 or 3 minutes left, so.
I already know the answer, and I agree with everything you say, except that I'd just like to say to everybody that has horses, use your horses more so that it benefits when these guys show up and shoe your horses. If you just put shoes on them for nothing, and they stand around and do nothing, they're wasting this guy's time, except he's putting money in his pocket, and it's just over, basically working the horse's feet all the time. If you're putting shoes on for nothing, you're not doing anything with it.
And to add to that, the more you work your horse, the faster the feet will grow. We don't know why it's that way. There's still a lot of unknowns about horse feet out here, and there's still a lot of research being done. But that's one of the things, is the more you use your horse, the more blood flow gets moved through those feet, and the faster the feet will grow. They've done a bunch of studies on the wild horses, etc., that'll prove to that theory. So he's absolutely right. So not only does using it benefit us, but using it benefits your horse as well, because we have more foot to work with next time we show up.
Does it make a difference to you if you work the horse before you arrive, like kind of tire them out, if you noticed?
It kind of depends on the horse. It's kind of a case by case. You know, a lot of times I'll show up to a horse that gets pulled right out of a stall, and it's a cool morning, they're a little fresh, and sometimes it doesn't hurt to lunge them and get them kind of in the right space of mind to be worked with. So even if you know I'm going to show up, if you just take your horse out, lunge them, do whatever you do on your normal routine, and then go around and pick up all 4 feet and get them in the proper mind space for me to show up and work on them, that's huge. That's something as a farrier that I really, really appreciate. When I show up and they say, hey, I've already had him out, I picked out his feet for you, I picked him up, I worked with him, should be ready to go for you. And by the way, it goes a long way if you pick out feet and clean them off before we show up too. So, anything else? Good? All right, thanks.